projects continue much beyond, and very often by the same students who took that extra efforts to be able to go the extra lengths to be able to come to a stage where it can actually go to the field. So this underlying theme will be there all through. And then, of course, I will talk about if you want to make a project which is successful in terms of reaching the users, what is it that you should do? And what are the constraints and what are the challenges? It's a lab to user journey in assistive technology. That's how I sort of titled this talk. And AssistTech is the name of the lab. It's globally a very unique lab because it is focused on mobility and education of visually impaired. So we find solutions which will make their mobility easier. That means their transport or movement from place A to place B easier. And also we look at solutions which will make their education easier. Just to get started, so we have, we're fairly large. 2011 census data is around 21 million disabled population. Note this does not include those people who are disabled because of age. Okay, so there is of course a much larger number who are now senior citizens or people who are very old and they are losing their certain senses, either hearing or visual or this because of the fact that they have become very because of the age. But these are people who are typically in a working population group, and that's a fairly large number. And among these people who are disabled, visual disability is very high. More than 5 million people are actually visually disabled. Again, this does not include people who are very low. The disability is low, but this is people who are close to whom we can call that either they are legally blind or they are very close to need some help in terms of assistive technology to be able to do their day-to-day job. Two of the important concerns if you want to include any of these population in our society is independent mobility and education. Let's understand why these things are important. Independent mobility, so imagine a child who cannot see. How does the child go to school? How does, there are very few blind schools, there are very few special schools which have residential facility. It perhaps cannot even cater to 1% or 2% of our total children who are blind. So there is a need for a person to go every day, and how does they go? And who accompanies them? Because very often these children are also from economically weak backgrounds. So nobody, either the parents or both have to be working to be able to make a living. And so clearly it is very difficult for them to every day take somebody to school and drop them and bring them back. So that's mobility is a huge challenge, and this continues. It continues because even if somebody manages some education, manages to get a job, how does he go to the workplace or she goes to the workplace? So independent mobility is very fundamental for any human being to be able to make an independent living. And so that's a very important requirement. Second thing is education. So of course, today we understand that we are living in a technology world, and without education, almost no job that can give you some type of a dignity is available. You need at least you have to be a high school graduate, or more preferably maybe even some type of college education is required to be able to make any dignified living. So this is very important. So both these things are extremely important, and that is the reason the lab focuses on these two aspects. What is the independent mobility challenge? So this is a picture from our own campus. So if you look at it, so normally if you have seen blind people, so the blind people typically carry a cane, white cane, and this is almost a globally blind people carry this. And this is a wonderful device. It helps them mobility because it not only tells you that your path is clear, there is no obstacle in front, but it also tells you that what is the nature of the surface, whether if the surface changes or if there's a puddle on the ground and you have to avoid water. All these things can be easily be found by the white cane. But one place the white cane fails is if there is an overhanging object. There is an object which is directly not on your footpath, but it hangs, and if you walk into it, you will actually injure yourself. So these objects are quite a few. This is not the only object. So I've shown some objects, but please remember that there are many such objects. When you put an air cooler or an air conditioner and which sticks out into the corridor, so those are objects which are again dangerous because a person could walk into it because the white cane cannot detect it. This is a dog which is sleeping on a ground, sitting on this ground. But we are very many stray animals on our roads, on our pedestrian paths. So this can be detected by the cane. But the problem with the animals is that if you are actually going to detect them with the cane, that means you are going to touch them. And if the blind person would not know where he or she is going to touch the animal, the reaction of the animal could be very wild, because you may be touching his face or the eyes or whatever it is, just because you are walking and you are straight away run into an animal. And so that can be a very, it can attack you back because you have sort of poked the animal with the cane. Of course, this is just a scene from IIT Madras where you also have deer, not just. So there are two challenges here. One is knee above obstacle detection. That is one challenge. That means obstacles which do not have a footprint, but they appear only above the knee, cannot be detected by the white cane. Second challenge is non-contact detection. That means I should be able to detect an object even before, without any need to touch it. So that is called non-contact detection. So these are the two fundamental requirements that were posed to us by some, blind users with whom we got in touch, and I will talk about it in the end, because they have been a very important part of our research and how they have played a major role in this activity. So we started looking at what type of solutions. This is way back, in this project started way back, almost I would say more than 14, 15 years back. And we came up with a solution which we call is a smart cane. It's an ultrasonic ranging device. Most of you would have studied what ultrasonic sensors are in your school. So these are sensors which operate above the level. Ultrasonic is called because they are frequency. These are just like pressure sensors, just like sound, but the frequency range is above the audio frequency range. So here we transmit and we receive. So you can see this device, there is one transmitter and one receiver, and you transmit an ultrasonic wave. And if there is an obstacle, it bounces it back and you receive it. And you can find the time difference between when you transmitted and when you received, because you keep on sending pulses. And this time difference tells you the distance of the obstacle. Very simple physics, but to implement it in a user-friendly manner was the most difficult thing. So I can detect if there is an obstacle in front of me, and I can, and this need not be on the ground. It could be a hanging wire. It could be a sticking a tree branch or an air conditioner, anything which is in this range, and we adjust the range so that it covers this one between knee and the head. It's an adjustable mechanism that is provided, and it gives the warning through intuitive vibratory patterns. It doesn't speak out. You can, of course, make it speak out 2 meters, 1.5 meters, but then it will become a chattering box. And because, you will keep on encountering some obstacle than the other. And for a visually impaired person, the sound from the surroundings is extremely important for safety. So they do not want a synthetic sound, which is disturbing them all the time. So what we did was we created, just like your mobile vibrates and whether there is a call. In a similar manner, there is vibrations that are created, but not one pattern, but we have multiple patterns. And these patterns give you the sense of how much distance is the obstacle. So within the 3 meter, there are 4 different patterns, and it divides this 3 meter range into 0.75, 0.75 to 1.5, and so on and so forth. It does not replace white cane. It is mounted on top of the white cane, so it complements white cane functionality. It is a detachable, because if the white cane breaks, so in India, the white canes are quite cheap, but they also are not, quality is not that high. So they do break if they get stuck somewhere into a spoke of a motorcycle, or many of these places it can get easily broken. If it gets broken, I can still take this device and put it onto another device. One of the challenges, and I will return to this, that when you start looking at real life problems, first of all, remember that these real life problems do not know any discipline. They are not discipline specific. Very often you would have to create interdisciplinary teams to be able to address real life challenges. So that's a very important part of it that is important for you to know. So what in this case, what happened was once we made a design, there are a lot of issues because people are using the cane for years and years. Some of them are using it for many, many decades. And we can't ask them now you change the grip so that you are able to use this device. They will never accept, they will just forget about the device. So it is important that, so what we had to do was we had to do a lot of engineering to actually get a handle which is actually suitable for all grips. So that means three or four different grips. Whatever grip they are using presently, they still can be used without changing that grip. So this was a very important requirement, and whichever mechanical and design group students solved it. Clearly, this is something which electronics or a computer science student cannot solve. At least not by training. Okay, they may solve because they have an interest in it. That's always possible, but not because of training. Of course, it's a very low power device, so it's chargeable. So once you charge it, it can work for 12 to 15 hours. And typically, a user uses it for 2 to 3 hours. So for a whole week, you can charge it once and it will be able to do 1 week. It's a knee-above plus non-contact obstacle detection device. Second thing I want you to know is if you want to make something usable, it takes time. You have to have a lot of patience. And typically, this is one challenge which students have because students have very limited time in college. They want to graduate and they want to go up. So we started this in 2005 and we actually released it with all CE certification and so on in 2014. So it's a 9-year journey. Of course, it's also because we were learning. It will not have taken 9 years, but it will still have taken 4 to 5 years. Please remember, students do not work full time. They also have other courses, other interests. So first 3 years, I had a group of students who were so committed to it that each semester they came up and did a project. We did some 3-4 iterations on it. Then after we had somewhat of a device which users liked it, but then we still have to make it manufacturable. We needed an industry partner. We got an industry partner, but getting funding not only for us, for the industry partner is important because in assistive technology, typically devices cannot make very big profit because the users themselves cannot pay. You have to go to charities or government to purchase them. So the margins are extremely low, either non-existent or low. So if you have to do a very, let's say, high quality development, it is expensive. And fortunately, we got funded by Wellcome Trust, which is a charity based out of UK, which started a program called Affordable Healthcare in India. And they selected our project, our prototypes to be one of the first projects that they would like to support. And another 3 years, 2011 to 14, we could make a release of this. And today I'm very sort of happy to say that almost 100,000 users in India and at least in 15 other countries, they actually use this device. This was the more challenging part. So one is you do the prototype, we have done the testing. And here you need an industry partner. Universities are not the best place to mass production. Universities are not the best place to release a product because when you release a product that also needs to be maintained, many people have this wrong notion, oh, you are IIT, why don't you just make this and give it to us? It is not a question of making and giving it to us. It's a question of maintaining, warranty, support, all these things that are required over a period of time. So we were quite fortunate that we have a very good industrial partner, Phoenix Medical Systems in Chennai, who was also an IIT Madras alum, who was interested in such a product. And this, what you see in the bottom right, is the assembly line in Chennai in his factory, where these devices are assembled. Okay, so whenever he gets a bulk order, he makes these devices in bulk. Otherwise, there's a small volume production on. But we also did a lot of other work to support this product in terms of Braille manual, self-learning Braille manual, audio DAISY manual, so that people can learn themselves. Either they go through a trainer who trains them, but reaching a very blind person through a trainer itself is a very big challenge. So we have made a lot of self-learning devices, so solutions in terms of audio instructions and so on, so they can go through those instructions and they can use this device. Okay. One of the biggest achievement in this particular project was really, at the time when we started it, there was only one device internationally available. It's called UltraCane. Actually, they had even discontinued it at the time we started the project, but it was also a university project which became a startup and they started making it, but then they discontinued, but they started again. But they were selling it for almost 680 pounds, which was at that time was around 68,000 rupees. And it was because of its cost, it has very low penetration even in developed countries. Even there, people are not able to afford it. Whereas we launched this product as around 3,500 rupees. So even today, the product is available at roughly the same price, and that made a huge difference. So you can see the type of cost cutting that was required to be able to make a popular device. Of course, we are benefited by the fact that our R&D was done through charity, so we don't have to return that money. So we only have to make sure that our manufacturer is able to manufacture and get reasonable margins so that his interest remains in the product. This is just the first device. Before I go to the next device, because otherwise it will all become monologue. So I would like to get some questions from you. So if there are any questions, please. Maybe somebody could raise the hand and then, maybe one of the coordinators can give them a chance to speak.
Sir, can you hear me, sir? Hello?
Hello, yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, I'm having one doubt, sir.
Please.
Sir, you have discussed about the assistive technology is used for the disabled persons.
Yeah.
Maybe if apart from that, disabled persons, assistive technology can be used by a normal person. Is there any other research going on? Only for the physically disabled people, this technology is used, this assistive technology?
Our work focuses on people who are visually impaired.
Okay, sir.
Of course, the visual impairment could come because of age also, like it's also possible, or it could be so people who are congenitally blind at birth, but there are today a number of people who also have genetic disorders and they are, they could see at birth, but over a period of time they lose their eyesight. Or third question could be somebody who has an accident, or a disease like cancer. So that also sometimes damages your eyes. So these are all the reasons where people could lose their eyesight. And of course, because of the age also, people who are, so these are possibilities. So we focus on it. Of course, there are other groups. IIT Madras, they have a very strong group which focuses on people who are orthopedic disabled, people who need wheelchairs. They work on solutions like wheelchairs. There are other groups. There's a group in Trivandrum which works on speech and hearing impaired, people who have it. So there are various research groups which work on this.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Dr. Ajanta Devi, ma'am, you can ask your queries, ma'am. She raised the hand. Dr. Ajanta Devi.
Yes, sir. Actually, I just want to answer for the question which was before. See, actually, my research is, which I have just done is related to multiple impaired. I have created a prototype where you can just speak, or even though you can just make it any sign, or you can just make it any letter to be printed, or even though if it is in braille, it can be converted into the speech, and it can be converted into the braille. And to the vice versa, if that exact person who is visually impaired and hearing impaired, if they are answering in only the braille script, it can be converted into speech in real time. So I have created a prototype for this, whichever the data, whether it is an image data or a speech data or a text data, that can be converted into braille, and to the vice versa of braille to speech. If you want, you can just Google it, my name as Ajanta plus Braille. I think you can just identify more number of papers allotted to that.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, if you're having any clarifications or any questions, you can ask to Professor Balakrishnan, ma'am.
Yes, sir. So actually, yeah, previously they have asked any other thing is there. So for that only, I just want to answer.
Okay,
Thank
okay.
you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Anyway, we'll continue with the presentation and then we will come back to their more questions.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
So the second device I will talk about is a device which actually helps blind people board public buses. So just imagine if there's a visually impaired person and if he or she is alone and wants to board a public bus, what are the challenges the person will face? One thing we can very easily see that one challenge will be, what is the route number? The person has a hearing capability, so he can or she can hear a bus approaching. And we know by the sound whether it's a bus or an auto or a taxi. That part, all of us have that, classification capability with us. And all of these sensitivities, whatever in terms of classification, even later on I will talk about direction, all of these are much more heightened for the visually impaired people because they use that part of the brain much more than what we do because they don't have a visual stimulus. So audio stimulus from which what they can decipher is. So they can hear the bus coming, but they do not know what the route number of the bus is. So now what is the choice? The person can ask some other person standing, assuming that it is a time when there are many more people standing. If nobody is standing, then there is a problem. But let's say if there is a person, other people are standing on the bus stop and he or she can ask, what is the route number? And maybe the person will hopefully respond and tell the correct route number. It looks to be a very simple transaction for us, but look at it from a visually impaired. And this is, whatever I'm talking, please remember, when I started working on this, I was very naive. I would also think exactly the way that anybody else would think. But now the challenge is for, if let us say you are in a new place and you were to ask a question, next time, whenever you are doing it, you can check how much profiling you do before you ask a question. You do not ask randomly any person any question. Many reasons why, you may find out what is the age of the person, how, whether the person is able to. And more importantly, in today's world, you will first find out whether the person himself or herself is not busy on the phone. Because very often I'm standing on a bus stop, I'm not just waiting for the bus, I'm also texting or I'm seeing some video. And let's say if somebody were to ask me a question, I could get irritated enough and say, yes, this is your bus, okay? Without even looking at the bus. Looks to me to be strange, but this is something which people have reported, okay? So because of the fact that the person actually you cannot find, you will not ask. If you're a sighted person, you will not ask that person because you know that the person is busy doing something and you don't want to disturb that person. But that luxury, unfortunately, a blind person doesn't have. So these are the type of discussions that are required with the user to be able to understand what the challenges of the user is. So route number is one problem. Second problem that is even more difficult and which is more of a issue in our cities is that the buses need not be always coming and stopping in the bay. You can see the pictures here. There's one bus which is stopping behind, another bus is already in the bay. And he does not align behind it because he may want to take off before the other bus, so he doesn't align, so he actually is getting onto the second lane. And if you look on the right side, so you can see that the bus has not gone onto the bus lane, but it has been outside it because of the fact that there are some autos and all standing and it may find it difficult to move out. Now, even if somebody tells you the route number, finding where is the entry door of the bus is a huge challenge because this is a time when people will be moving towards the bus. So that's the second challenge. And the device that we have is a globally unique device, which actually solves these challenges, both these problems simultaneously. Of course, if you have a very nice structure where buses will always come and stop in the bay, then of course, situation is very different. But unfortunately, our streets and our system, we do have this problem because the buses could stop. And also there are too many buses, so there could be also multiple buses at the stop, one behind the other, and they may not be able to come and stop at where you are stopping. We video recorded all types of boardings and we found that almost people have to travel around 20 meters if you have to cover 95% of the boardings. That means if number of boardings, some of them may be, bus actually comes and stops close to you and you may have to only travel 1 meter or 2 meters, but very often you may have to travel even up to 20 meters. So that's the type of a distance we took it into consideration when we were actually doing this design. So our device is a simple handheld device, almost looks like a TV remote, and I will show you the picture of it. And there are two transactions that happens. First, the person can hear a bus approaching, he presses the query button, an RF query is sent to all buses in the vicinity. Buses have a device which responds by their route number. This user module reads out all the route numbers. Locally, the module will read out all the route numbers one by one. And once the route numbers are read out, if the route number is of interest to the user, then the person will make the select button. Otherwise, if none of the routes are of interest to him or her, no select button is pressed and there is no more audio noise generated. We will have audio noise in our stops. So, but if the bus route number is of interest, in this case 501 was of interest, so then the person selects the route number, and then the speaker that is attached to the bus next to the entry door, that starts speaking out the route number, and that gives the audio cue for the person to move towards the door. And he can do multiple times, he can trigger each time he presses the select button, so it will actually read out the route number again. So this forms the auditory cue to be able to locating the door. So you can find the route number and you can also locate the door. So it solves both these challenges. And this is how the device after miniaturization and so on. So it looks like they are not to scale. The one on the left is a user device. It has only two keys. One is a select query key and another is a select key. And the query key is to be pressed once, it has 1 bar, and select key is to be pressed twice, it has 2 bars. And there's a user unit, and the bus unit is something which is with a controller, the transceiver, as well as speaker. It all fits on compactly, and I will show you how it can be installed on a bus. And this is, we call it an onboard system. It's a globally unique system. We have a patent on this, and we have done a lot of trials. So the first set of trials, what you see on the top was, we did it on 25 Mumbai buses, covered all the buses on 2 routes, starting from the Back Bay depot. And at that time, we were not using the bus battery, we were using our own battery because it was still in a phase that we wanted to prove that system works. So you can see the battery unit below the seat, and then this was fixed on the window. So this was the first set of trials. We had a huge success. We could train first the users to what is called supervised boarding, and then we asked them to take the bus from one stop in that route to another stop. And they had a 92% success in taking the first bus on the route by themselves, 350 boardings. And how do we say that the first bus on the route? We asked them to note down the time they reached the stop. We asked them to note down the time they got the bus. If they waited for 10 minutes and the frequency of the bus was 20 minutes, that means they got the first bus. If they waited for 30 minutes, that means they missed one bus and they had to take the subsequent bus. But independently, they were able to board with a high success, and then we repeated this after miniaturization of the device. So now you can see that the device actually gets fitted onto a window pane, which is just on top of where the seats for the disabled are reserved. And now this operates with the bus battery, so it doesn't require any battery. So we have had extensive trials, very good results. But now we want to, before we go to regulators, we want so these are still pilots in the sense that these users were still our users. We want to put it on at least 500 buses and let the users use it for their regular journey. And once, if it is proven that yes, their regular journey, they are able to take it effectively, then one can ask for it to be made mandatory because on all buses, because disability services all come through regulation only. Those of you who know that in buildings, modern buildings, you have ramps, and the reason they have ramps is that so that the wheelchair can go in. But please note, if the building codes do not require a ramp to be made, almost nobody will make a ramp because it's expensive, it takes more space, it takes area. But the fact that your building will not get approval unless you have a ramp. So similarly, initially, because the number of blind people who use independently the buses is so small that the bus operators will never find it attractive, financially attractive to put these devices. Though the device is not very expensive. The device for the bus will cost less than 7,000 rupees, and the device for the user will cost less than 500 rupees. User devices, of course, can go into some of these government schemes by which they can get it, but the buses have to be, made a regulatory requirement. So this is second mobility device I talked about. This is called the onboard device, which sort of we developed some time back. We're still waiting. We don't have the funding to do a large scale implementation. Unlike the SmartCane, which is the individual user device, this is a society solution. The society has to feel that, yes, we want to make them, include them and invest on it in terms of the solutions on the buses. I will turn now into education. So I talked about two mobility device, and I will also later on talk about some more mobility device which are more at a research level. These are first I'm talking about solutions which have reached the users. In the brief discussion, there was a mention of Braille. I think many of you may have heard of this Braille. Braille is a script, it's not a language, please remember. You still need to know a language. You still need to know English, Hindi, or Tamil, because Braille is just a way of writing. If you know Tamil, you have a Tamil Braille. If you know English, you have. Of course, the script is all the same. These are the same type of dots, but they convey different symbols in different languages. So, but this is good to represent text. But what do you do with pictures? How do the blind people access pictures? How do they actually access digital content? And we will talk about solutions for both these in the next 15 minutes. Once we started working on this SmartCane project, we also had opportunity to travel abroad and see what is happening in the blind space globally. We found that tactile diagrams as a means of actually learning for blind people have made huge progress globally. Nothing new. For many, many decades, 4 or 5 decades, they have all types of books available, starting from children's books to even, other books, even some cartoons and anime, and so on. These books are all available with in tactile form, so that even a blind person can touch and get the diagram. But in India, there's a complete absence of tactile diagrams. Only some blind schools themselves have made a few diagrams, but you cannot. What is available as a book is only Braille. That means only the text part of it is available. The diagrams are removed. So you can imagine if children is given a book which doesn't have the diagram. Most of the subjects are today, especially science, economics, management, all these subjects are, if you don't have graphs, if you don't have pie charts, if you don't have a laboratory set of physics diagrams, if you don't have, diagrams, how do you study? If you don't have geometry, how do you study mathematics? How do you study these subjects? So typically what happens in India is most of the visually impaired people are expected to go into history, language, music, subjects which only can be taught textually. This is what they are encouraged to do, and which obviously limits their opportunities, limits their interest considerably. But when we got exposed to this, when we realized that why is it these diagrams are not available in India? Why is there no production process? We realized that the processes that they use are very expensive. It takes 150 rupees to make 1 page of these diagrams, as these are the processes that they use outside. So we decided to work on it, and we developed a complete process by which we could create these diagrams. And this is a map, and this is what you see on the left is a book made by American Printing House, and what you see on the right is a map of India made by our own process. We were the first to use 3D printing, created a software flow and 3D printing for making the mold, and then using thermoforming. Of course, thermoforming process was well known, but mold making was a difficult part in terms of, and in this process, we also reduced the cost substantially. So, so today with 20-25 rupees per page, we are able to make this. Of course, some quantity is required. You cannot just make 1 diagram, but let's say you're making 20 or 40 or 50 diagrams. At that price, we can make this. And we also created, so unlike SmartCane and other devices I talked about, or even onboard where we have industry partners, here it was not possible to get any industry partner. There are Braille presses, but they never showed. We invited them, we showed them the process, but hardly anybody showed any interest. So we decided to create our own non-profit, So we have a non-profit startup called Race Lines Foundation now operating for slightly more than 3 years, which makes, and we have a huge number of these tactile books today available for blind children. And we are focused on NCERT books because that is used in large volume. And we always look for partners in other, because English and Hindi is something which our people can handle. But we also look for partners where we want to go for other regional languages, other languages which are popular in the States. But if you happen to visit our website, you can see all these books today. You can purchase these books. We also design. We work with somebody who wants to design, some people, museum people, airline people, restaurant people. Some of these people have started coming who wanted to create this special effect for people with visual impairment. They have to give them this one. One of the books on which we made thousands of copies was this menstrual hygiene management book, which is, one of these UN agencies want to give to blind women, girls all over the country. And so we produce a large number of books for them to be able to teach them menstrual hygiene. There are lots of such books we are in the process of making. So this is one thing which we have successfully been able to take it out from the lab and to create a company out of it. It's a non-profit company. So whatever we only charge for the cost that we incur, because there's no profit here. And so it relies a lot of it on charities and CSR funding and so on to be able to survive, because eventually, even though we say non-profit, but the blind children have no capacity to pay. They have to get the books free. Somebody else has to pay for these books, and typically we go through charities or CSR. At some point, we are hopeful that the government will also, like SmartCane, the government buys and distributes to blind people. But we are hoping that sometime the government will also adopt these books as part of their commitment to be able to give books to blind children in the country. The fourth product I will talk about, which is something which is now into small volume production, is about, excuse me, is about digital content. Today we all work in the digital world. You get email, you see read the email, but you don't never print it and read. Okay. But if you have to go through Braille, then one option is they print. But then, if everything is to be printed on the internet, we just keep on surfing. We keep on reading, material, wiki, and so on and so forth. But how do the blind people do that? Of course, they have one option. One option is to go through what are called screen readers. I think that also was mentioned by the lady that you can also use. Yes, the screen reader is a very good device. You can, whatever is in the text, you can hear it through audio. There are, open source as well as proprietary screen readers available. NVIDIA is a very popular open source screen reader. So you can install it on, and mobile and Android solutions like TalkBack exist, which can give you, they have text to speech and, and now various Indian languages also, we are getting solutions. But it is not always good just to listen. Imagine you have no capability to read textbooks and somebody was only reading the textbooks. Can you just read mathematics like this? Can you read a lot of subjects which are just listening? It is for stories, it's fine. For revision, it's fine. But you still need to read and write. And reading and writing are complementary skills. If you are not able to read, you can't write. Okay, so very difficult for a person to write because the sentence formation and so many things that are important in terms of how does the mind works and forms that. So the Braille is, of course, but Braille is on print. Braille on print is we know, but Braille on electronic Braille is also something which has been very popular outside. We saw lots of devices, except that they were extremely expensive. So a device which is just, I will show you later on the device, something which has 40 cells. That means it can read 40 characters in one line, and of course you can keep on refreshing it to read line by line. That itself costs more than $4,000. And the other problem was the cells that are used, the two companies which used to manufacture these cells, many of them will make these systems out of the cells, devices out of buying these cells. But the cells themselves are very expensive and they are very proprietary, so you can't make the same cells because they are all patented. So we start absolutely from scratch. Some of our very bright mechanical engineering students worked on it, and we created this refreshable braille cells using shape memory alloys. And what you see now is the various stages of development, and finally we have a latch-based design that's going into production now. And what you see is these are the two devices we launched a year back. What you see on the left is a 20-cell device. It has a braille keyboard, and what you see on the roughly 2 years back. So what you see on the right is a 40-cell device which has a QWERTY keyboard. So the right device is almost like a laptop. You can actually do email, document preparation, internet surfing, all of this you can do. And it comes with a 40-cell device, and you can do that. So this is completely developed, prototyped, again of course in collaboration with 2 industry partners. The cells are made in Chennai again by the same partner that we have for SmartCare, Phoenix Medical Systems, but the design is the electronics and the software is being done at a startup called Critical Solutions, which is a startup which came out of our own department many years back, and they are into in embedded systems. So they are providing the design and production capability for that. Again, what was available at 1.8 lakhs, we could launch it at 40,000. So that's the type of a price reduction that is possible. Of course, it's also because in India, we can talk about more larger volumes, because unfortunately, we have many more people who use this. They need this. So volume also helps in cutting down the cost of both in electronics as well as in software. Volume really helps in cutting down the cost, unlike mechanical and so on. So of course, the braille cells do not really, you can't cut down the cost so much, but the rest of it can go down if you want to do that. I will, before I continue, I would like to break here at this point and take any questions, and then depending on the time, I will take it up. So these are the 4 devices I talked about, and I will talk a little bit more about the research part of it. But at this point, let me take some questions.
Participants, if you are having any questions, you can feel free to interact with our resource person. Faculty members, research scholars, students, if you are having any clarifications, any doubts regarding the assistive technology, you can interact with our Professor Balakrishnan. Please make the session to be more live and interactive, because Sir has given so many contents on assistive technology. You can interact with him, please.
Okay, I think I will continue. I will another 15 minutes, and then
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
we can.
Yes, sir.
So this is, of course, a device that is still a research device. This is something we are developing in the lab. Prototypes, I'll show you the prototypes. We call it mobility assistant for the visually impaired. And basically, it's all presently what is very popular, and all types of AI techniques that can be used for training and then classifying, recognizing. So we have a face detection module, we have a stray dog and cow detection module, we have signboard detection module. So only difference is that we look at the problem as our problems. Solutions, is unlikely to be, because if you look at signboards, India has 2 things. One is very often our signboards are multilingual. Depending on the state, you may have local language and English, or Hindi, English and local language. So 2-3 languages are not very uncommon. And also very often our signboards are hand painted. Not always these are, fonts are. So that means that the sizes vary. And if you just use the OCR tool, which is available globally, you will find that their accuracy is very poor. So these are the type of things that we have incorporated, and we provide a mobile interface, and one could switch on or switch off whatever this one that the person needs because each one of them actually obviously takes in terms of the speed, the time that it takes to do the recognition. But finally, as you see on the right side, it can give you directions to where you are going based on, and also give you the information regarding what is there on the signboard if you have a stray dog or that is detected. So this is the internals of the device. It's a project which I'm doing along with another collaborator, Professor Chaitanya from my department, and it's supported by DST. And what it has is it has some accelerators. So which is these accelerators allow you to do this deep neural network implementations much faster. And what we can do is shown over here. Okay. So we have created our own data sets, and those data sets can be used by other groups also to test their own solutions and devices. And we have a proof of concept, but we need to do much more. And this is one of our research staff using this device. So the device is in the pouch, and if it's a camera, and then the person can move around and can get the information. So still not tested with the user. We are not reached a stage where we can test with the user, but we would hopefully in another 6 months time or so, we'll be ready for that. We have a very ambitious project going on called Reading Assistant for Visually Impaired. So we call it Ravi. So it's a fully automated web-based technology, and it works with all types of PDF. You see, the problem with the PDF is, so if you have a PDF document, so very often the text will be, unless you have, of course, you can also have scanned PDF. If you have scanned PDF, you have to first do OCR and then, but even if you have a digitally digitally bound PDF, you have generated it through some LaTeX or Word or some file, you still have a huge problem when it comes to equations, when it comes to diagrams, when it comes to tables. The navigation of this is not well supported unless you can actually create proper annotations, proper tagging on these PDFs. Otherwise, when the user actually gets a mathematical equation, he or she cannot decipher what is actually happening. So very often people use today for publishing something that is emerging, which is also very accessible, is EPUB. Of course, HTML is also, so the EPUB is also comes from HTML, so HTML is also fairly accessible. EPUB, of course, has many more features than what HTML has. But we convert these documents and try to make it accessible by finding out everything. So, for example, something like, let us say, I give you a very simple example. You have, let's say, a chapter name written at a very footnote or at the header. Very often you will find a book that you have the chapter name or the some title is written which repeats. Now, if it is also read out, it's going to be extremely confusing for a blind person because that's not really part of the text. And suddenly, if you're reading and if you read the last line and then next page, you just read the title of that book. See, when we are reading, we just ignore it. Okay, but if the text-to-speech reader does not ignore it and reads out all that is written, it will be completely impossible for somebody to comprehend because there are many things which are similarly, let's say, footnote. Footnote is, though appears at the end of the page, but it is not actually at the end of the page. It is at the place where it is cited. If you arbitrarily, because the previous sentence may be half sentence and then arbitrarily read the footnote where it actually comes, that means that from the document, I have to figure out that this is actually a footnote because the PDF doesn't have that information. It is only a printing format. So it will, of course, put that this one saying that reference saying 1 and then put a footnote 1 and then you have to supposed to read the footnote. So, but then electronically, if I want to read it out through text to speech, I need to figure out that's a footnote. And if the user wants to, then at the time when he reads or she reads, at the point where the footnote is, it should be presented there as an option to read, not at the end of the page, because doesn't make any sense. Even the page boundaries are very, not meant really for such type of linear reading that you don't need those page boundaries. Similarly, columns, we do format it in 2 columns, but what is the meaning of it? So it's all should go when you're doing through text to speech. 2 column does not mean anything. So these are the type of conversions that need to be done to make it accessible, and our tool does it. So let me not go over it. If anybody is interested, they can write. It's a fairly large project which we have been working on, and now I think we are close to releasing a prototype, maybe in a few months. And a lot of these tools are now working and tested, and we can actually clean up a document and present it in a format in which it becomes accessible, a PDF document. The last research project that we are on is we talked about outdoor mobility. What do we do with indoor mobility? See, all of this is for independent living, and independent living is fundamental to any visually impaired person. You cannot, if somebody is to rely on always somebody else to take him to some place, how often it will work? In this modern world, it's not likely to work. Opportunities for work gets completely limited, opportunity for education gets completely limited. So what do we do in an Include Now is a project which we are supporting indoor navigation. We map the building, we provide all types of services that are present in the building. They need to be tacked on to this. And how do we on an existing building? And then finally, through Bluetooth beacons on a mobile app, the user will be able to navigate through the building. So this is the project that's on. And we have installed this on All India Institute of Medical Science Ophthalmic Center, ground floor and first floor of the center. We already have these devices installed, and we are doing extensive testing there and trying to establish that this particular technology works, that the person, and it's a very large, it's also useful not just for the blind person, it's also useful for a sighted person, because in such buildings, anybody could get lost. Our signage systems are not very advanced, except at airports and metros. You will find that the signages, you always have to ask somebody to reach some place, which is maybe works for most of us, but for independent mobility, that is not, how can you independently go to where you want to go? That's important. And these are, of course, 24 OPD rooms, and in a very large center, and mobility is a huge challenge here. And this is the same thing true for railway stations, bus stops, any big building, or even government buildings, big secretariats, where a person can easily get lost. So the issue is to have an indoor navigation system. Again, it's an app-based solution, and presently it provides English and Hindi interfaces, and it can actually allows you to move within this particular building. So this is, and we're also trying it out a number of buildings within the IT campus. So these are some of the solutions that the last three solutions that I said are still not in production. That means they are still not in terms of scaling up. But before I wind up, I want to say a few things about assistive technology in India, if any of you want to work on it. So it provides a lot of opportunities because we have a very unstructured environment. I talked about the bus because the bus doesn't stop in the first lane. Second, it can stop anywhere. So that means all of this gives you, unfortunately, that is a situation that we are in because of the economy, because of the nature of our society. But on the other hand, you can also look at it in a very innovative way. And it also is important that it's unlikely that big companies, foreign companies are going to solve this problem. Unless we solve these problems ourselves, nobody is going to solve these problems because they don't even understand these problems. Extreme affordability is not just like I can reduce the cost by 20%, 30%. You have to talk in terms of reduction of cost by 4x, 5x, 10x. Because the solutions that are developed in high-income countries just do not make any sense. Nobody can afford to buy them in this country, and that is, On the other hand, the opportunity exists because we do have high volume requirements. So, it's not like we need, because we do have a large number of people who need these solutions. So that helps in terms of trying to cut down the cost. Finally, it is not just, whatever I described is not work of myself. There's a whole group of people and many more students, actually, at least 70 to 80 students who have worked in our lab in the last 10 years. But these are some very important people. Dipen Manocha, he's actually a blind person, though you can see his eyes are open here, and very technologically savvy. And he has been instrumental in getting us into this space. So he always comes up with new challenges, and his team, so he runs an NGO called Saksham, and they are a partner. They, two of their, before the pandemic, two of their employees were blind people who worked in the lab side by side with our researchers. And that gives a very different feel to the lab. Rohan, one of our early students today, of course, is a colleague of mine, but he was very dedicated and committed, and worked on projects like SmartCane. Professor PVM Rao, I think I mentioned it somewhere, is a professor of mechanical engineering and deeply interested in design and innovation. So he's been part of our group. Sashi is a managing director of Phoenix Medical Systems in Chennai and been a partner. Suman and Pulkit, these are two young engineers and scientists who work with us and who have been instrumental in bringing up both the Braille display system as well as in now Pulkit is managing the Race Lines Foundation, and Piyush has been my lab manager for now nearly a decade and a person who is deeply committed to working in this space. He is now a PhD from Computer Science Department at IIT Delhi. What started at undergraduate projects? So we did not start from research as the primary objective. We started as actually building systems. But slowly we started getting newer and newer problems. And today, at least first two people have completed their PhD in this area, Piyush on mobility and navigation of visually impaired, and Richa on making tactile graphics more effective. How do they know? And two of them are working on for their PhD, accessing maths by visually impaired, that's Akashdeep, and indoor navigation, localization navigation problem by Vikas Upadhyay. Finally, I will end this talk by saying that our goal is to touch 1 million lives. That means that the solutions that we have come up in the lab should positively impact lives of 1 million people. That's the goal. And with that goal, we work on these projects. That's what is my formal presentation. Now I am open to questions.
So kindly share your contact number and mail ID so that I have a few problem statement and a few concept oriented related with assistive technology so that we can just go for research.
Just to look for M. Balakrishnan on internet, we will get my mail ID. My department mail ID is what works, mbala@csc.iitd.ac.in. Very simple. Just go for M. Balakrishnan and IIT Delhi and you will get my.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I can also put it on the chat. Let me just put
it. Sir, I'm having one question, sir.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Sir, you have explained the 4 or 5 different systems.
Yeah.
In the systems, you have provided a solution which is cost effective by comparing to the existing systems.
Can you repeat this question?
Sir, you have explained 4 to 5 systems on assistive technology what you have developed in your lab.
Yeah.
And the systems are very much cost effective by comparing with the existing one. So, like,
yes.
So how you have achieved this, the cost effective system by comparing with the existing system? Can you outline the guidelines towards this cost?
So first of all, if you develop your system yourself in India, it will be, so 2 things have helped. One is, see, the problem in the global scene as far as assistive technology is concerned, in most countries, it's a very small volume, small number of people who have this type of disability. Okay. So any research you do, and if you are going to produce a very small number of, for a small number of people, your margin to support the salaries and so on and support everything is very expensive. So that developing a system itself in India itself makes it much more cheaper because we have a high volume requirement. Especially if you can make it cheap, then you have a economical, then you have a high volume. Second thing we have benefited is that all our funding is, if an industry develops it, they need to capital, and the capital comes actually at a very high cost. And in India, the capital is even more expensive than abroad. That means, let's say, if I want to invest 1 crore of rupees in making a device, that 1 crore also has to be got by selling the device, because after all, when the industry makes. So, as an educational institution, and as also the area, the way the area is, that we have been able to get charitable funding to do all our R&D. All our solutions are priced to self-sustain. They are not subsidized. The SmartCane at 3,500 rupees, it costs only maybe 3,000 rupees to produce. There is a 500 rupee margin, because without that margin, that industry cannot continue to produce. So you have to understand, it's not profit, it is just survivability. So, because it may come for warranty repair, you have to give a warranty repair, and And sometimes there will be more demand, sometimes there will be less demand, but people have to still be paid and so on. So we, similarly, when we say tactile graphics, we are selling these pages for 25 rupees, we make it for around 18, 19 and sell it for 25 rupees. So we keep margin, but the fact that we are doing it ourselves and the volume is there makes it economical.
Hello. Hello, Korean IIT, CSE. There is some noise in your end. You can put your questions even in the chat box also, please.
Yeah, those of you who want to use the chat box, please use the chat box. I put my email also on the chat box, so somebody wants to know my email.
Sir, I just want to read about all these things. So, do we have any research papers? Can I find it in your website?
Yes, there are research papers, and you can just type on internet AssistTech IIT Delhi. If you type this, you will get my lab web page, and my lab web page you can download many of the papers. Some of the very new papers may still not be there, but you can so send me a mail. We can. But many of the papers are there. All the papers on Smart Cane and Braille display and all of them are there. You can download.
Okay, so thank you.
Participants, you can put your questions even in the chat box also. If you're having any issues in your audio, you can put your questions in the chat box, please. Sir? So in the meanwhile, I'm having another question, sir.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, DST, Department of Science and Technology has announced one of the scheme called the AMT, Advanced Manufacturing Technology. In that particular scheme, they mentioned about assistive robotics. So can you share something on assistive robotics, sir, please?
Yeah, assistive robotics is a very important area. Globally, especially Japanese are extremely advanced. So, from cleaning your house, which is actually now in India also you can buy these robots which clean your house, but from cooking and so on and so forth and all types of assistance, the robots are going to play a major role. And especially in aging society like Japan, the problem has been very serious, but I can see the same requirement in countries like India. So the assistive robotics for specific tasks, some of them may require mobility, some of them may not even require mobility. It may be a sort of a small. So there are a huge set of things that one can do. Because whenever, see, India may be still considered a young population, but because of a large size population, the number of old people are also very large. And now with families becoming smaller and the children also traveling far, so many old people are living by themselves. So they do need assistance. So one thing is you go into a old age home where everything is done by another human being. That is one possibility. But very often people may not prefer that. People may want to live in their own homes when they are older because they're familiar with the surrounding, they're familiar and they need assistance for doing many things. So I think it's a very important area. And because the robotics now is very well developed in terms of people understand all types of, 3 degrees freedom of motion, 4 degrees, all these types of joints are available. So, it's going to be a very important area. So I'm not an expert in assistive robotics, but one can very easily see that this is something, so let's say even for a visually impaired person, somebody who accompanies that person need not be a human being, but that will take much more time because completely in, let's say, unmapped areas for a robot to move is still a challenge. If the area has been well mapped, robots are available. Industrial robots have become very common, which can actually move within a mapped, space. But unmapped spaces is still some way off.
So there is a question in the chat box, sir, by J. Rexy. What are the common programming languages used in assistive technology? Is there any specific software tool for development process?
No, it's not. Assistive technology that way is not any language specific. Okay, language means human language, that's different. Okay, you have to go for visually impaired, you have to have braille. If you go for people with, speech, then you need to have sign language. So those are, but in terms of programming language, there's nothing specific. Today, everything is happening either in Python or Java, because if you have to put those AI ML tools together, so that's Python is popular. So as far as the language in terms of computer programming languages is no different from what you do in any other field. So there's no, assistive technology has nothing very specific. Okay, and but yes, if they're talking of the domain, yes, there are differences. Like even sign language, for example, Indian sign language is different from other countries' sign language. So you need to train your systems. If you have to produce either a recognized Indian sign language or to produce output in Indian sign language, you have to know that and train your systems to be able to do that.
Sir, there is another question. What's the scope of assistive robotics in Indian education system in your perspective? Please share your views, sir. What is the scope of assistive robotics in Indian education system?
I'm not sure where the robotics part is coming. Of course, assistive tools have a huge, see, one of the things that we also looked at, but we have not made any progress is, so one of the important thing is the heterogeneity. Even in a class or even in a school or even in any system, you have students who are actually at different levels in terms of their background and understanding. So now if I produce a digital book, okay, so let's say I'm writing a book for 10th standard. So normally I will assume that people have done whatever mathematics or science up to the 9th standard, and then they are actually working on that in terms of, but if you are, but the point is that some students may not actually remember what he did in 8th or 9th, and he may wants to, get a refresher, okay? Or maybe the learning part, somebody is a slow learner, somebody is a fast learner. So if you put everything in only one way, then you will always try to attack the middle. You will always try to make everything for what is the average person's learning capability. But average, there is something called an average person is very rare. Either people are, if you draw any type of a Gaussian distribution, there are people who are going to be above that average or below that average. Can we have adaptive digital books, which could be very interesting in terms of, that means that when you are reading and the type of questions or the type of interaction you have with the digital book, it actually understands what is your level of reading. Like you play games. So games, they keep on increasing the level. You start from some level 5, then go to 4, level 3, whatever. The games become either becoming faster, and then at some point you start breaking down. You're not able to go, but somebody else can go higher or somebody else may go lower. So it's a similar thing, like concept should come in terms of learning, so that more people get actually benefit from learning, because they get a sort of a book which actually adopts to the learner's level rather than be flat about all the learners. So this is, I would say, that something which is very interesting. There are a lot of components of any of you are interested in looking at this problem. NLP, natural language processing, is important because understanding, and then of course having for example, these days what do? We don't know the term, we go to Wiki and Wikipedia and learn the term. Okay, this we do all the time, but point is whether this can all happen in terms of textbooks. So that would be very interesting.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. There is another question, sir, from Save Ramalingam. How do we find out recent innovations in IoT agriculture domain? Implementation of IoT agriculture is more costlier one. How this technology will be implemented in more areas? So he's asking about IoT. Yes, Mr.
Yes, there are journals, there are publications, so I'm sure you can search. So one of the challenges that will come in places like agriculture is our Indian agriculture practices are very different from global. Even for example, the land size, average land size which a farmer has is much smaller than. A lot of automation has happened even decades back. is very often, let's say, if you look at the US farm, many of these things like tomatoes and oranges and all are very often not plucked by human beings for not today, for 50, 60 years. Okay, so they had, because these farms were hundreds of acres, and they could and they all done in a manner so that there is something can move in between this and can pluck all this that is required. But clearly those technologies are not suitable for countries like ours. So certain things will work, certain things will not work. So I would assume that just like in case of assistive technology, a lot of research has to be done within the country. And of course, it could be adaptations. You don't have to do everything from scratch. Certain things may be known and can be applicable, but things which are not known, and to make it cost effective is also very important and not so easy. The reason is that the margins are very low. Everybody expects in society that these things should be, because if the food becomes more expensive, a lot of people will not be able to afford to buy food. So there is a continuous pressure to keep the food costs low. And all that is challenging in terms of applying technology, because when you apply technology, you need actually, at least in this, in that particular phase when technology is just evolving, you need some funding inputs to come in. So this is but then clearly very interesting area, because if you can increase the yield or reduce the losses that happen because of various things. And we see a number of attempts, both at the sensor level. On one hand, for example, water is very scarce in most parts of the country. So whether the plant requires watering or not, this is one place where IoT is being used now considerably. So sensing the humidity, sensing what is the right level of water consumption that is required so that I can save on water. This is an area which is going to be very important. Similarly, in terms of sensing whether any type of diseases or pests have come, that is again very important. So there are many challenges in agriculture that people can research on. And IoT solutions are good, but making them to the field is going to be a challenge, also because of the fact that cost, as well as issues regarding maintenance and weather, all weather solutions and things like that, because they will just be exposed to sun, to rain, and the devices solutions should work. That's the challenge.
Yes, Mr. Sedaramalingam, if you want to interact, you can unmute your mic, you can speak.
I would like to comment. There is don't think of costs, the technology is there to simplify. So I'm not sure what does the second sentence mean, technology is there to simplify. If you don't want to go to the user, don't think of cost. Lab research does not require you to think of cost. Prototyping doesn't require. But that's the first phase of the project, up to reaching to the concept. But as soon as you think that you need to go to the users, you have to start thinking of the cost. Not only the cost, how do you going to maintain it? Who is going to, there are many more things which are in scaling that comes. How are you going to productionize it? Because finally the person who is working at a production level is actually, so there's a huge challenge for us in the refreshable braille display, because we needed these braille cells. Please remember they have movement only 0.9 mm, and they had to move within the accuracy has to be plus minus 0.1 mm.
Sorry, sir. Actually, that answer is for Sedaramalingam, sir. Actually, he said that IoT for agriculture, it is costlier now. And he just put up a question for you. So for that, I have answered.
Okay.
Costlier is not the thing. So it is not for you, sir. And actually, it is.
No, that's it.
Actually, whenever we just speak about the project, or even though it is simplifying now, so even whatever be the field of application, whether it is agriculture or it is sonar images or satellite imaging or whatever the image processing or signal processing, whatever we just go as an application, the costlier comes the first when we just think about the proposal. But when we just go for simplifying, it's their concept is there to simplify. So I just want to answer question.
On the other hand, because for example, I was looking at some project which was actually increasing the sugarcane yield, sugar yield from sugarcane. Even if you can increase the yield by 1%, the type of savings is in crores. So so actually they can afford a fairly expensive process also. But if you have to guarantee that it will actually increase their yield by 1% or 2% or 3%,
True,
whatever.
sir. Exactly true for your words, sir. So, what is the thing now when we just speak about or discuss about, even though fuel, if it is 50 or 50 paise, now it is down. Now we said, yeah, the price has been down. If it is increased as a 5 paise, there was an increase. So, costly as whenever we just, I'm just going with your words, sir. Really, it is exactly. Yeah, sir.
Sir, I'm having one general question. So here we are the faculty members and research scholars. Please suggest some of the guidelines to prepare the proposal and how to approach the industry collaborator for make a successful project. Please provide your guidelines, sir, please.
Yeah, so there are two things, one is, you talked about how do we prepare the proposal. So it's a very sort of, I think, one would need again one seminar to do that. But basically, when you look at the proposal, so typically you should look at something with impact. If you are successful, of course, it is not guaranteed that every project that you work on will be successful. Okay, and what is the measure of success is also different. So very often we have very successful projects, but which doesn't reach the users. But at least think of it at the point that you are writing a proposal. I am writing a proposal just for doing some research. That's also good learning. But then, or it is also likely to go to the field and make an impact. In my view, if you think that if the proposal is going to make an impact, both you believe and you are able to convince the people who are going to evaluate your proposal that I genuinely want to make an impact by doing this project, then you have a much better chance of success. Okay, that's the first thing. Because very often people just write proposals, they look, somebody else has written this proposal, so I write, and many of these proposals are not even relevant to their ecosystem. Let's say you are to write in agriculture, please look around, what is the agriculture that, what is the, what are the crops that farmers in your area actually, working on, what are the crops that come out, and then talk to those farmers before you write a proposal. What is it that they think that, can, because writing a proposal, of course, if you yourself are from a farming community, great, because then you perhaps seen your parents or seen your family working on the farm. But many of us who are, let's say, urban or cosmopolitan people who have not actually been to a farm, if we were to write a farming proposal, let's say you take my case, I write only those proposals which my blind contacts suggest me. People who network that I have now of blind organizations and people who are visually impaired, I don't write any proposal which I think I can solve. I want to solve a problem which they need. So that has a much better chance of success. That's one thing. Industry partner is more tricky, especially because it's unproven technology. And second, as I said, very often the technologies do not give you high margins in terms of industry to make an investment. So you go into, typically, let's say you are working in biomedical, you should go into and talk to a person who is actually making biomedical devices. Because he brings to the table many things which you cannot. Okay, there is a process of certification of biomedical devices, which is quite complex. And if that person has gone through it, he will not fear it. He will not, he will readily do it because he had done for 5 devices, he's doing a 6th device. It's not a challenge for him. But if, let's say, you go to an industry guy who does embedded systems but never done a biomedical device, and you want to make him or her, make that industry a partner for your, chances of success are very low. The person will not know what type of, costs or efforts or contacts network is required to be able to pass a device for actual use, because there are many standards. Same thing in defense, same thing in railways. So many of these areas have their own licensing certification issues, and somebody who works in that space is much more aware of it and can very easily take it up. So choosing an industry partner is also important in terms of the domain. Of course, similarly with agriculture, it's easier that if somebody is making agriculture tooling, but let's say he does agriculture tools, but he only does mechanical tools. Even he's better than, though you may bring in the embedded systems aspect of it, he may not have experience in doing embedded systems. But still, He has a network. He knows how to distribute. He knows what is the price at which the farmers will buy such a product, or how they distribute. These things are extremely important when it comes to a product. Okay. So choose an industry partner looking at these aspects, and you are likely to be more successful in taking this, and I can assure you, if you can successfully take one project out of the lab, your funding problems will be much simpler. Most of the academic institutions in India, or most of the faculty, have never an experience. They do hundreds of projects because they have a large number of students, and they keep on doing projects in different areas, different domains. But if you ask them, is there anything that you did 5 years, 10 years back? Is anybody using it? Most of the time, the answer will be no. Okay. And if the young people, if you can make one breakthrough, first of all, making that breakthrough is hard, but if you are able to do it, you'll be able to repeat it, and your credibility will suddenly change in terms of funding. Okay, the type of people who are ready to fund will increase. And certain spaces are going because there are a lot of startup funding available. If you are a faculty member, look for students who actually have an entrepreneurial bent of mind. Don't always try to get students who are only wanting to get a high-paying job. Okay. There are many students who are actually looking at education as a mechanism to get a job. Of course, that will be true for most people. I have nothing against them. But if you can get some students who are either because of their family background or because of their own mental makeup, they are ready to take some risks with their lives and do some startups. So this is today very interesting because there are a lot of startup funding is available from various sources, government as well as private. Okay, and that will be, you do the project, you first do a research project in the lab for whatever period, if it depending on whether it's a PhD student or an MTech student or a BTech student. 1 or 2 or 3 years, develop a concept, take that concept and go to for venture funding, from incubation funding, and go to a startup funding and get a startup grant. Anywhere from 20 lakhs to 50 lakhs is not very hard to get today, and to be able to do a good product. But that money is not very big actually. So that money to get a product is not, but yet if you are careful and if your students that who are working with you, they are also, let us say, are committed, so you can make a difference. You can get a few prototypes done, and once you have 10 prototypes done or 5 prototypes done, which users certify that yes, they work well, then you do the scaling up, and then by that time you can also get either the startup itself can become an industry, or very often you can tie up with an industry partner, and you can you can still to be in an innovation environment, and they can do the production and start selling, and you can get some royalty on it.
Sir, thank you so much for your most valuable response, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and all the best.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. It was really an eye-opener webinar. So people here can share your feedback if you are comfortable. Also, you can share your feedback in the link posted in the chat box. So by filling this, you shall get the participation certificate in near future.
Thank you. Thank you.
I immensely share my love and gratitude on behalf of our students and department towards our chief guest, Dr. M. Balakrishnan, for his time and patience in answering all our queries and in sharing his knowledge. So this was actually an eye-opener webinar, and I'm really keenly looking forward to read on the research papers and also to work on any new projects in the near future. And I feel grateful to be a part of this webinar. Finally, to express the gratitude, I call upon Dr. R. Karthikeyan, Professor, Department of Computer Science and Engineering, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Shyamala. So before I want to give you vote of thanks, I'm expecting some of the participants to give the feedback even in the meeting also, if you are interested. Please, I need some feedback from the participant, 1 or 2. Due to the time constraint, we can restrict 1 or 2 participants. You can share your feedback here because our professor is also in online. So if you are giving some feedback, it will be very much happy. Okay.
Actually, the session was really very nice, and each and every questions and even though we are actually, according to my concern, I'm already had done a few projects on assistive technology, and even advanced level I have just done. Whereas the products and the prices which Star showed, it's really superb and motivating the new upcoming students and scholars. So I think it's really a good and informative session. And thank you, sir. And as an industry person, we are also having a few problem statements. Surely we would just contact you related to that proposal, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable feedback. Any other feedback? Due to time constraint, we are expecting one more feedback, please. Okay. So if there are no further feedbacks, so I'm very happy to propose the vote of thanks for this most valuable research seminar on assistive technology. But before we are going for vote of thanks, definitely I want to summarize the contents what our professor told in this 1 hour session, nearly 1 hour. So our professor told about the role of assistive technology in their own laboratory in IIT Delhi, Assistive Lab. So they developed the project SmartCan, which used ultrasonic ranging applications to detect the obstacle and the knee above and non-contact obstacle direction. And Star has told that this project is actually a 9-year journey. So definitely we admired by seeing the contribution given by your colleagues as well as your students community. Really inspired. So in this moment, I'm also sharing that our students team also is working on project proposal. So we have submitted the proposal to Department of Science and Technology. So our students are very much committed, very much interested. They are doing their effective work. And Star has told about the various other products like public bus access challenges, and he explained the working principle of the particular product. So really, it's wonderful explanation of the working principle of the public bus access challenge. And then in the education field, especially the braille script, how the blind is going to access the digital contents and pictures, it's a very informative one, as we are new to this assistive technology. And he discussed about the tactile diagrams, tactile graphics, and the various current titles of NCERT books which can be used by the blind child. It's very nice. And he shared about some of the dot books and MADI and RADI and indoor navigation, etc. So really, the session is very informative session. And finally, like he has given the objective of their lab to touch 1 million lives. Definitely, that statement has touched our every heart. So in future, we are also trying to touch everyone's lives by carrying out the very good projects. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So by this moment, I wish to convey my vote of thanks. I deeply convey my thanks to our respected professor, Dr. M. Balakrishnan, Department of CSE, IIT Delhi, for his presence towards this research seminar on assistive technology. So thank you very much for your more valuable contents. In this moment, I wish to convey my gratitude to our chairperson, Srimati K. Dhanlakshmi Ammal, our pro-chairman, Rotarian RSK Raghuram sir, for their continuous support in organizing these kinds of webinars and research activities. So I thank our dynamic principal, Dr. D. Vasudevan sir, for his encouragement and support towards organizing this research seminar. So here I wish to convey my sincere thanks to our head of the department, Dr. D. Shanti ma'am. Due to some other official activities, madam is not able to join today. So whatever the proposals we are taking to our HOD, if it is really worth, immediately our madam has approved. So thank you very much, ma'am, for your motivation and support towards organizing this research seminar. And also I wish to thank our faculty members of CSE department and HODs of other departments and faculty members of other departments, especially the students team, the students who are attending this the research seminar. So without your support, this seminar may not be successful. And I forgot to say the participants for this particular research seminar. So we got the participants from India as well as abroad. Really, we are very much happy because our objective is getting satisfied. So we have reached the research perspective on CQ technology to the entire teaching community, research scholars and students community. So thank you all, my dear participants, for your joining and the patient listening for the past 1.5 hours. Definitely without your support, this research seminar will not be successful. So thank you all the participants. So once again, I thank you all the organizing team as well as one of the coordinators of this research seminar, Dr. Sheikh Farida Begum, Assistant Professor CSE Department. Thank you, ma'am, for your support towards this organizing the webinar. So once again, thank you one and all. Thank you. Over to Shyamala.
Thank you, sir. I deliver my hearty thanks to our event coordinators, Dr. R. Karthikeyan, Professor from CSE Department, Dr. S. Sheikh Farida Begum, Assistant Professor from CSE Department, for arranging this wonderful event. Thank you for the participants, the learners down across the world. Every beginning has a sweet ending, and here it is. Thank you all for making this event a grand success. Sayonara, this is Shyamala Devi Chenimo. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, sir, for your valuable time. Thank you, sir.